I decided to surprise my husband and brought some homemade food to his parents myself, but when I got to their house, I froze in shock when I saw what was in the window. Melissa gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, her knuckles white against the black leather. The casserole dish on the passenger seat kept sliding around every time she took a corner. 3 hours of work sloshing back and forth in a 9x13 pan. Derek's favorite lasagna, the one with those ridiculously expensive imported cheeses that cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. She'd gotten this brilliant idea around noon. Well, maybe not brilliant, more like desperate, if she was being honest with herself. Patricia had been doing that thing again at last week's dinner, where she'd smile and nod and say all the right words, but her eyes would go somewhere else entirely whenever Melissa spoke. Like she was performing politeness instead of actually feeling it. Howard was different. He'd always been the easy one, the one who'd compliment her cooking and ask about her job at the marketing firm. But even he seemed to tense up whenever Patricia got that look, like he was waiting for something to explode. Today was supposed to fix all that. Today was supposed to be the gesture that finally broke through whatever invisible wall existed between them. God, she was naive. The house looked exactly like something from one of those home improvement shows Patricia was always watching. Every shrub trimmed to mathematical precision, every blade of grass the exact same height. Melissa had always wondered how much time Patricia spent maintaining that perfection. Seemed exhausting, honestly. She parked behind Howard's truck, this ancient blue Ford that he refused to replace despite Derek's constant offers to help them buy something newer. Still runs fine, Howard would say, patting the dented tailgate like it was a faithful dog. The October air bit at her cheeks as she balanced the casserole against her hip and fumbled for her keys. She'd almost made it to the front door when something caught her eye, movement through the big picture window that faced the street. Patricia's pride and joy, that window. She was always talking about the natural light it brought into the living room. Curiosity pulled Melissa sideways, toward the landscaping that bordered the house. Just a quick peek to see if they were home, maybe catch them in the middle of their Sunday routine so she could time her entrance better. What she saw made her stomach drop into her shoes. Howard was in his recliner, that massive brown leather throne he'd owned since before Derek was born, but he wasn't alone. Some woman with silver hair was practically in his lap, her hand doing things to his chest that definitely weren't appropriate for Sunday afternoon football. The casserole dish hit the ground with a wet thud. Cheese sauce exploded across her shoes, tiny chunks of pasta bouncing off her jeans. But Melissa couldn't look away from the window, couldn't process what her eyes were showing her. This woman, whoever she was, looked comfortable, like she belonged there, like she'd done this before, many times before. Where the hell was Patricia? Melissa's brain started spinning through explanations. Maybe Patricia was at the store. Maybe this was Howard's sister from back east, the one who visited sometimes. Maybe there was some perfectly reasonable explanation for why this stranger was touching Derek's father like she owned him. But deep down, in that place where your gut knows things before your brain catches up, Melissa already understood what she was seeing. And it was so much worse than she'd imagined. Keys jingled in the front yard. Melissa spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs, and watched Patricia emerge from a silver Honda loaded down with shopping bags. Nordstrom, from the looks of it. Patricia was humming something under her breath, some old song Melissa didn't recognize, completely oblivious to what was happening inside her own house. This was like watching a car accident in slow motion. Patricia fumbled with her keys, dropped one of the bags, muttered something that sounded like a curse word. She bent to collect scattered items, throw pillows, candles, some kind of picture frame still wrapped in plastic. Meanwhile, inside the house, Howard and Mystery Woman had vanished down the hallway toward the bedrooms. Melissa crouched behind Patricia's prized hydrangea bushes, feeling like the world's most reluctant voyeur. She should run. She should get back in her car and drive home and pretend she'd never come here, never seen anything. But her legs felt like they were made of concrete. The front door opened with Patricia's familiar, cheerful call. "Howard, honey, I'm back. Did you miss me?" The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Silence stretched from inside the house like a rubber band about to snap. Melissa could hear Patricia moving around, the thunk of shopping bags hitting the floor, the jingle of keys being tossed onto that little table by the door where they always landed. "Howard?" Patricia's voice carried a note of confusion now. "Your truck's outside. Where are you hiding?" More footsteps, moving deeper into the house. The living room was empty now, just Howard's recliner with that telltale indent where two people had been sitting way too close together. Then came a sound Melissa had never heard before, this low, keening noise that seemed to rise from somewhere deep in Patricia's chest, like an animal in pain. "Oh God, oh no, no, no." The words were barely whisper level, but they cut through the afternoon air like broken glass. Whatever Patricia had found, it was worse than just catching Howard with another woman. Through the window, Melissa watched her mother-in-law stumble backward into the living room, one hand pressed against the wall for support, her face completely drained of color. This wasn't the shock of discovery. This was the confirmation of something Patricia had suspected for a long, long time. Patricia collapsed onto the couch like her strings had been cut. But here's what really got to Melissa. There was no surprise in Patricia's reaction, no confusion, no disbelief. Just this bone-deep exhaustion, like someone who'd been carrying a secret that was too heavy to hold anymore. Patricia pulled her phone out with shaking fingers and dialed a number she clearly knew by heart. "Sarah, it's me." Her voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "He's doing it again." "She's here in our house." A pause, then Patricia's voice cracked completely. "I can't keep pretending I don't know. I just can't do it anymore." The pieces started clicking together in Melissa's head like dominoes falling. The tension at family dinners. The way Patricia would sometimes look at Howard with something that wasn't quite love, more like resignation. The careful politeness that never seemed genuine. How long had this been going on? How many other women had there been? And the biggest question of all, did Derek know? Patricia was still on the phone, her voice getting stronger with each word. "No, I'm done protecting him, done protecting everyone from the truth. It's time to stop living this lie." Movement in the hallway made Melissa look back toward the window. Howard appeared, looking completely normal, except for slightly messed up hair. No guilt, no panic, no shame. Just mild annoyance, like Patricia was interrupting his afternoon plans. The other woman was nowhere to be seen, probably slipped out the back door while Patricia was on the phone. How many times had they practiced this routine? Howard said something to Patricia that Melissa couldn't hear, but her mother-in-law's response was crystal clear. Patricia stood up, drew back her hand, and slapped Howard across the face hard enough to make his head snap sideways. 28 years. Patricia's voice carried through the window like a battle cry. 28 years of your lies, your promises, your excuses. Howard rubbed his cheek, and his whole demeanor shifted into something darker. He stepped closer to Patricia, using his height to intimidate her, and Melissa watched her mother-in-law instinctively back away. The power dynamic in that room had just become dangerous. Melissa's phone was in her hand before she even realized she'd reached for it, Derek's contact already highlighted. But what would she say? How do you tell your husband that his father is a serial cheater and his mother might be in trouble? Howard grabbed Patricia's wrist, not gently. She winced, tried to pull away, but he held on tight while saying something in a low, threatening voice that made the hair on Melissa's arms stand up. That's when Derek's car pulled into the driveway. Her husband got out of his Camry with that easy smile he always wore when visiting his parents, completely clueless about the domestic crisis unfolding 20 feet away. He was carrying some kind of gift bag and whistling, like this was just another pleasant Sunday visit. Melissa wanted to scream, to run to him, to somehow prepare him for what he was about to walk into. But she remained frozen behind the hydrangea bush, watching her husband's world prepare to explode. Derek bounced up the front steps and opened the door without knocking, something he'd done since he was old enough to reach the handle. "Hey Mom, hey Dad, I brought you those fancy chocolates from that place downtown you always." His voice cut off like someone had pulled his plug. Through the window, Melissa watched Derek's face change from happiness to confusion to absolute horror in about 3 seconds flat. Derek stood in the doorway like he'd been turned to stone, the gift bag dangling from his fingers. Patricia's tear-streaked face and Howard's defensive posture painted a picture that didn't need any explanation. "What's happening here?" Derek's voice had that carefully controlled tone he used when he was trying not to lose his temper. Patricia straightened her shoulders, and Melissa watched her transform from victim to warrior right there in the living room. "Your father has been cheating on me, Derek. Not just once, for years, and I'm done pretending it's not happening." The words hit Derek like physical punches. He actually staggered backward, reaching for the doorframe to keep himself upright. The gift bag fell to the floor, chocolate scattering across Patricia's spotless hardwood. Howard finally spoke, switching on that familiar charm he always used when things got complicated. "Your mother's being dramatic, son. She's upset about something else entirely and taking it out on me. You know how emotional women get." The condescension in Howard's voice made Derek's jaw clench. Melissa recognized that look. It was the same expression Derek got when someone tried to manipulate him at the office. "Don't," Derek's voice was quiet but deadly. "Don't you dare try that garbage on me." Howard's mask started slipping, revealing something ugly underneath. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under, the sacrifices I've made for this family. Sometimes a man needs." "Needs what?" Derek's voice rose dangerously. "Needs to betray the woman who's been loyal to him for almost 30 years? Needs to humiliate her in her own home?" Patricia moved to stand beside her son, and Melissa watched them form an alliance right there in the living room, mother and child united against the man who'd been lying to them both. "There's more," Patricia said, her voice steady now. "The money that's been disappearing from our joint account, the credit card charges I'm not supposed to ask about, the weekend business trips that weren't actually business." Each revelation hit Derek like a separate blow. This man, his father, his role model, the person he'd defended in countless family arguments, was a complete stranger. Howard was getting desperate now. "Son, don't let her turn you against me. I'm your father. Blood is thicker than—" "Blood doesn't excuse betrayal," Derek cut him off. "And it sure as hell doesn't excuse making Mom feel crazy for noticing what was right in front of her face." Melissa realized she was crying, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched her husband's childhood die through a living room window. Derek pulled out his phone and handed it to Patricia. "Call Aunt Sarah. Tell her you're coming to stay with her." "Derek, you can't be serious," Howard protested. "This is our home, our marriage. We can work through this like adults." "Work through it?" Derek's laugh was bitter as winter coffee. "Like you worked through it the last time? And the time before that? How many chances does one person deserve, Dad?" Patricia took the phone with hands that were steadier now, fed by her son's support. "I should have done this years ago. Should have stopped protecting you from your own choices." Howard's desperation morphed into anger. "You think you can just destroy our family because you're feeling insecure? You think you can poison my own son against me?" "You destroyed this family," Derek said flatly. "Mom's just finally strong enough to stop pretending it's still intact." The front door suddenly swung open, and Derek stormed outside, his face a mask of rage and grief. He stood on the porch for a moment, hands pressed against his temples like he was trying to hold his head together. That's when he spotted the casserole dish in the grass, cheese sauce, and broken ceramic scattered across his mother's perfect lawn. His eyes followed the mess straight to the hydrangea bushes where Melissa was hiding. Their eyes met across the yard, husband and wife, both witnesses to the same family catastrophe from different vantage points. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Melissa?" Derek's voice cracked with disbelief. "What are you? How long have you been here?" She stood slowly, her legs cramping from crouching, dirt stains on her knees, and embarrassment burning her face. "I came to bring dinner, I saw." She gestured helplessly toward the window. Derek's expression cycled through confusion, mortification, and finally this deep sadness that made her chest ache. He'd been caught in his most vulnerable moment, his family's darkest secrets exposed to the one person he'd always tried to protect from their dysfunction. "You saw all of it," he said, "not a question, a statement of fact." Melissa nodded, not trusting her voice. Inside the house, she could hear Patricia making arrangements with her sister, Howard's voice, a low rumble of excuses that nobody was listening to anymore. Derek walked across the yard toward her, and she braced herself for anger, for accusations about spying on his family. Instead, he pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could feel his whole body trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry you had to see this mess." Melissa pulled back to look at his face, seeing the little boy who'd grown up believing his parents had the perfect marriage, who'd used their relationship as a blueprint for his own. "This isn't your fault," she said softly. "You don't have to apologize for their choices." Derek's laugh was hollow. "Don't I? I've been making excuses for him for years. All those times Mom seemed upset, and I convinced myself she was just being overdramatic. All those business trips that seemed fishy, but I didn't want to think too hard about them." From inside the house came the sound of drawers slamming, closet doors banging. Patricia was packing, finally taking action she'd probably rehearsed in her head 1,000 times, but never had the courage to follow through with. "She's really leaving him," Derek said, like he couldn't quite believe it. "She should have left him years ago," Melissa replied, surprised by the venom in her own voice. Derek nodded slowly. "Yeah, she should have, and I should have supported her instead of playing peacekeeper for a family that was already broken." A car pulled into the driveway. Patricia's sister, probably. The cavalry arriving to help with the escape. Howard appeared in the doorway, his face red with indignation. When he saw Derek and Melissa together in the yard, his expression shifted to calculation. Even now, even caught red-handed, he was looking for angles. "Derek, bring Melissa inside. We need to discuss this as a family, work through our differences like reasonable people." The manipulation was so transparent it made Melissa feel sick. Howard was already trying to control the narrative, to position himself as the rational one surrounded by hysterical women and an ungrateful son. Derek's response was quiet, but absolutely final. "No, Dad, we're done with that." "Done with what?" "The pretending, the excuses, acting like Mom's feelings don't matter as long as you're comfortable." Howard's carefully maintained facade cracked completely. "You, ungrateful little." "Choose your next words very carefully," Derek warned, stepping protectively in front of Melissa. Something in Derek's voice stopped Howard cold. Maybe for the first time, he realized that his charm and paternal authority had lost their power over his son. Patricia emerged from the house carrying 2 suitcases, walking past Howard like he was a piece of furniture. She looked at him with something that might have been pity. "The divorce papers will be served Tuesday morning," she said calmly. "I've already retained a lawyer." Howard's face went ash gray. "Patricia, please, don't throw away 28 years over a misunderstanding. Think about what you're destroying." "I'm not destroying anything," Patricia replied, her voice steady as a rock for the first time since Melissa had been watching. "I'm finally picking up the pieces of my self-respect." She turned to Derek and Melissa, her expression softening. "I'm sorry you both got dragged into this ugliness. This isn't how anyone should spend their Sunday." Derek hugged his mother like he was trying to hold her together. "I love you, Mom, and I'm proud of you for finally putting yourself first." Those words seemed to give Patricia the last bit of strength she needed. She loaded her suitcases into her sister's car and drove away from 28 years of marriage without looking back once. Howard stood in the doorway, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. The house behind him seemed to echo with emptiness, all that perfect landscaping and pristine furniture, but nobody left to appreciate it. "This is your fault," he said to Derek, but there was no real conviction behind it anymore. Derek shook his head sadly. "No, Dad, this is all yours." They left Howard standing there alone, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. During the drive home, Derek was quiet for a long time. Melissa watched the familiar streets of his childhood neighborhood blur past, wondering how many other picture-perfect houses hid similar secrets behind their manicured facades. "I keep thinking about all the signs I ignored," Derek finally said. "The way Mom would go silent when Dad talked about his business trips. How she'd flinch sometimes when he put his arm around her. I thought I was being a good son by not asking difficult questions." Melissa reached over and squeezed his hand. "You were protecting yourself too. Nobody wants to believe their family isn't what it seems." Derek pulled into their driveway, but neither of them moved to get out of the car. Sometimes, you need to sit with the shock for a while before you can face normal life again. What if I turn out like him? Derek asked quietly. What if I inherited whatever broken thing makes someone capable of that kind of betrayal? The vulnerability in his voice broke her heart. You're nothing like him. The fact that you're even worried about it proves that. Derek turned to look at her, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. How can you be so sure? Melissa thought about the broken casserole dish in Patricia's flower bed, about the 3 hours she'd spent making Derek's favorite meal just to surprise his parents. Because you married someone who brings you homemade lasagna instead of looking for dinner somewhere else. That evening, Derek called his mother to check on her. Patricia was settled at her sister's place in Seattle, at least temporarily. She sounded tired but relieved, like someone who'd finally put down a weight they'd been carrying for decades. I should have done this years ago, Patricia told them over speakerphone. I wasted so much time hoping he would change, believing his promises every time he got caught. I forgot that I deserved better than scraps of respect. After they hung up, Derek and Melissa sat in their kitchen, trying to process everything that had unraveled in the span of a few hours. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the quiet of two people who'd witnessed something life-changing together. I keep thinking about that woman, Melissa said. The one with Howard. She looked so at home in their house, like she'd been there dozens of times before. Derek nodded grimly. Mom said this had been going on for years, plural. Makes you wonder how many others there were, doesn't it? Does the number really matter? One affair would have been one too many. Derek reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Thank you for being there today. I know watching my family implode wasn't on your Sunday agenda, but I'm glad I didn't have to face that nightmare alone. Melissa squeezed his fingers. I just wish your mom had found her backbone sooner. Better late than never, Derek said, and for the first time that day, he managed a real smile.